The amplitude of the creations within time and space is of such magnitude that it would not be possible for a third-level human to imagine for an instant how wide is the range of hierarchies, orders and species existing in each of the universes, so we will refer to suggesting a general orientation on the typological structure of the beings and creatures that populate deep space. In general, there are three large categories that we could well name: material, semi-material or median and immaterial beings and creatures. Material beings constitute the most basic link in the chain of evolution of the created species, endowed with autonomy, intellectual reasoning and free will, although not always in possession of an emotional body. Of anthropomorphic configuration, the different races that populate the universes are only physically distinguished from each other by their morphological features, color, height, mobility, proportions of their members, etc. This conformation of head, trunk and extremities being the most widespread by all interstellar spaces. However, within this category there are a series of unique morphological, organic and functional aspects that are very interesting, such as the fact that some of these beings are winged, that they lack any type of hairiness, or that, on the contrary, they are covered by scales, cartilaginous type macrocells. We also find them with different types of skin: viscous, gelatinous, bristly, semi-liquid, etc., different body temperature ranges, different nutritional and physiological needs, unusual locomotor systems, etc. At the same time, there is a wide variety of functional systems that determine, for example, that some beings breathe and others do not, that some feed on solid and liquid foods, and that others do so with exclusively gaseous and/or energetic foods of the type corpuscular or even immaterial, that they have a waste-secreting system, or that their own body recycles everything they consume without the need for evacuation. And it is that, in short, there are as many prototypes as your imagination allows you to accommodate, although it should be made clear that, in general, the anthropomorphic structure, as we said before, constitutes the most widespread model in the different universes, and that, in any case, the beings and creatures that populate them respond to a humanoid typology not very different from what you are used to seeing, and that, for the most part, coincides or is identical to what is known in Nunjameka, Earth. Thus, we find that the beings that populate space have a head, a trunk, 2 arms and 2 legs with their corresponding appendages or fingers. In almost all cases, of the head we could say that it is not always proportionate to their height, and that, although in most cases, it is populated with abundant hair, longer in females than in males, this attribute resulting in a clearly differentiator. There are also beings totally devoid of it, as well as any type of hairiness or scaling. In the same way, and according to the perception of a being from Nunjameka, his extremities, fingers or thoracic volume, can be considered abnormal according to the aesthetic canon of this world. According to this criterion, those organs with relational functions, such as the eyes, whose size and fields of vision may be significantly different, or the mouth, with very thin lips or even without them, also appear different in their configuration. Morphologically speaking, not always used to feed or to communicate verbally. The ears or auditory pavilions, sometimes simple holes or non-existent in some cases, etc. In general, the humanoid type that is most prevalent and that has a greater presence in the universe is an extremely beautiful, harmonic and proportionate being, very similar to the morphological types that exist in Nunjimeka. Almost always taller, with smooth skin and of extreme softness, of light tones that vary from white to pink or bluish, whose organism stops its cellular aging after 30 years of local time. A being with a small stray hair that rests on his shoulders, and in the case of the woman, it usually reaches her waist. Rather large eyes, sometimes huge, and that slightly remind those of the East, and sometimes those of cats, with light colors, extremely clean and deep, a nose and perfectly constructed nasal septum, sometimes just holes, mouth and teeth with impeccable anatomy, small or capriciously shaped ears, immaculate hands with extremely delicate fingers and nails, absence of all such as skin hair, though not pubic hair, and sexual attributes as you know them in Nunjimeka. Almost all inhabited worlds are inhabited by a single race and a single evolutionary state, perfectly uniform and homogeneous, so that at the time visits to other habitation nuclei resume, a being from Nunjimeka will find it extremely curious to verify how the beings and creatures of any nearby world are practically equal to each other, with very slight differences and the same degree of consciousness, so there are no categories or privileges of one over the other. You will notice that they all appear to be the same age, and that only his eyes and, in some cases, his hair, are the specific indicators of his old age. You will find a strange harmony in its configuration and in its order, as well as the same patterns of behavior in all situations and circumstances. You will also find the accessories similar, such as the way of dressing or covering yourself, practically identical for everyone, as well as what we could call personal hygiene and body treatments. However, we must bear in mind that we are referring to standard prototypes of intermediate worlds, and that there are certainly other spheres with a much lower level of development than that currently achieved in Nunjimeka, as well as other very old, extremely evolved ones, where the beings that they populate them, even with material bodies, they are absolutely different, within their anthropomorphic structure, endowed with an extraordinary perfection that necessarily accompanies their degree of development. This type of beings, whose physical bodies, of lower density, approach the semi-material, radiate light, both at the epithelial cell level, and through all their bodily openings, as they are transmuted towards the immaterial, since they transform into light energy the excessive dense matter, and this allows them to project themselves consciously, physically, wherever they wish. Regarding its longevity, we could say that the physical bodies of almost all material beings are subject to recycling, which arrives sooner or later, depending on their level, progress and degree of evolution, towards immaterial states, and that, therefore, we meet beings whose material outpourings are extremely brief, along with other creatures thousands or millions of years old in local times. It should be noted that there is usually not the slightest contact between civilizations, with very disproportionate levels of development between them, limiting these contacts to those that are on the same plane or evolutionary level, or, in stages not too far apart from each other. Chronologically speaking, although it is worth noting that, historically, the most heterogeneous worlds such as Nunjameka have considered as gods all the visitors who have eventually landed in the sphere, forming part of research or preservation missions and that. Likewise and certainly, these same entities have had to manifest and self-identify as spiritual or as divinities to be more credible, every time they have tried to convey a message of symbolic or practical value for humanity. This has been another message from Esti Hayway to all of you.